I asked through the website what the waste was that was going to have to go to a landfill after, or be disposed of after the process. And the answer was, we know of no waste that needs to be disposed of after the process is over. Well, my question is, what exactly do you think that the consultants did? There was $1 million, $1.5 million spent for consulting on this project.
They ate very well.
Any other comments as far as what were they doing? How did they come up with something that's diametrically opposed to what you're saying? And they should have looked across the broad spectrum.
I mean, I would think if I was paid $1.5 million, I mean, I'm here, I'm not getting paid anything. But certainly, and I don't know the consultants, but certainly they should have caught some of the things we caught, and especially if you're getting paid that much money. And you should have, number one, and I'm not commenting on their background or qualifications, right. But it seems to me they should have asked the question, don't you have any proof about energy generation? Not just claims of what you can do. Don't you have any emissions data? If you look at the proposal, it says that the German government has the emissions data from one of these so-called reference plants. And the company doesn't. That's, I think, kind of impossible. And so I think a consultant should have been asking these questions about, your biggest thing on the website is 150 tons a day, and you want to make it how big here? What are you going to have 40 of these units all lined up and take up the whole town? So I think there's some basic questions that should have been asked that were not asked. The thing we've been talking about tonight, where on page 7 of the proposal, it makes the outrageous claim that there would be no air pollution. I mean, consultants should say, hey, don't say none, say there'll be a little or whatever. So I think more due diligence would have been expected. The first gasification plant I ever reviewed of a proposed one was in Alameda, California, much bigger than Logansport, right next to Oakland in San Francisco. And their consultants got paid $500,000, but actually put out a lot of nonsense as well. And we were there not getting paid anything and pointed out the flaws in what those consultants were saying, and the Public Utilities Board thanked us. But they wasted over $500,000. So when I heard about $1.5 million here from this little town, I was pretty alarmed, and I'm not even a taxpayer here. So I think those are questions you should ask.
Yeah. I'm sure that the city officials in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania wish they listened to that 28-year-old at the time from Philadelphia who came to their meetings and told them they were going to go bankrupt instead of all their high-priced consultants. And that's just the habit, is that they listen to these high-priced consultants because they must know what they're talking about. But there's a certain culture and set of information that they have, and they like to be victims of their own propaganda, I guess is as best as I can put that. But, I mean, they're getting from us more value in the information that we can offer than they're going to get from all these high-priced consultants, because we spend a lot of time looking at what works and what doesn't, and we don't have a bias in this fight. I mean, God, I would love to have a whole other life that isn't helping people run around fight smokestacks, but that's just what I fell into, and I have a lot of other things I'd be gladly doing if I didn't have to do this. But someone mentioned about the credibility of the information. You'll notice a lot of my slides have citations, have websites, they refer to federal government agency data. I'll be glad to make that available through the local group. Anyone who wants to contact them and say, where'd that thing about them being most expensive come from? And I'll get you straight to the sources. They're usually from industry or government. It's not like we're doing any of these studies our own. We're using their own information against them, and that's what's most powerful about it. And to finally answer your question about the solid waste, it's like there's a playbook that these companies have, and they'll come into communities and say, we don't have a smokestack, zero emissions, zero waste, we don't create any waste, nothing goes to a landfill, and they're all untrue. And I see this in one community after another where they make the same claims, but they're easily knocked down if you just ask the right questions. And on this whole idea of the waste product being a building material that someone's going to use, ask them to point out a single place where pyrolysis char, or even conventional incinerator ash, is being used commercially as a building material where people are paying for it, or even taking it for free and doing something with it. Because all the cases I know where they've tried to do this with normal incinerator ash, they've crumbled, fallen apart, not had a good product, and end up stockpiling the stuff and end up ultimately putting it back in a landfill where almost all of it already goes. They have not succeeded in doing this. It's just part of the marketing fantasy they come in with, but it doesn't end up being real.
I want to say something. I know nothing about anything. I'm just a resident of Logansport all my life. I was born here. So was my husband. And we never lived anyplace else. We've always lived in this city. And I love it. And I love Cass County. And a lot of my relatives, or his relatives, I should say, are farmers. And we have here in Cass County, we are so blessed because we have some of the best soil in the United States. In Cass County, in Carroll, in Clinton, and it's all muck. We here in these counties, and we are a garden state. Processes have gotten so over the years that Indiana right now is one of the top states in the United States, and we feed the world. Now,
Is your question about the impact on agriculture?
yes, yes it is. I can't believe that this company, I don't know how to pronounce it, is so stupid that if they were true and really believed what they have is the best, why aren't they out east where there's a whole bunch of people in a little bitty area and they have all the trash they want and you don't have to haul it?
Thank you for the question.
Yeah, okay. But they're stupid. So what do? They come to a state that feeds the world. We're mostly all farmers, and they think they can tell us the best because we're Hicks. Well, by God, we're not Hicks. And I really think this energy and this burning and the ash and all that gets in the meat. Cows are very sensitive to it. They'll foul up our meat. There goes Japan. They won't buy any meat from Tyson. All of our tomatoes that are grown in Walton can't be canned anymore.
Yeah, you're very gracious, but would members of the panel address the impact of pyrolysis upon dairy, cow, and tomatoes?
Well, I really think the farmers better get interested in what they're trying to do.
And I'll just say, very quickly, I think you raised really important concerns. And pyrolyzers trying to come in here without claiming there's, no air pollution or very little air pollution, but not providing the data. And yet there's a couple of plants they pointed to. So you're being asked to trust a technology that we believe there's evidence from actual similar pyrolysis plants, or at least technologies using a facility like the Roma Land, California one that did try pyrolysis, failed, that did emit pollutants including dioxin. One of the things that the US EPA, they did almost 20 years ago, a massive study called the dioxin reassessment. And very briefly, this was a study the chemical industry asked them to do, but it kind of backfired because it found out it's super toxic in small levels of exposure. It's what's called a persistent bioaccumulative toxic. Means in mother's breast milk it accumulates, and then you give it to your baby, your nursing infant. But what they found is the main route for exposure is through the food chain. So it becomes, if indeed dioxin would be emitted, and that's the evidence that we've seen, I would be rather alarmed as a consumer of the food grown in places like here, as well as certainly for the farmers whose livelihood and for the area whose economy where this is so important. So, and that's just one example. So it's, I think there's, both by the omissions of data from the company and the available evidence that is out there from similar facilities, there's a lot to be concerned about as a farmer, as a resident, and as consumers of the food as well.
This chart I failed to cite, but it was in my presentation. This is straight from the EPA in 1994 in that study Bradley talked about. This is where you get your dioxin from, and it's almost entirely meat and dairy products because it loves fat and hates water and climbs up the food chain very fast. And this had a big impact on what I choose to eat. But this is important for the local farmers knowing about this. I know in a battle I helped folks with in Erie, Pennsylvania, which is an urban community, there's a meatpacking plant right next door to what would have been the largest tire incinerator in the world. And that company said that if they built that incinerator to create those 90 jobs, they would leave the city and pull out 250 jobs because they were not going to live next to that other incinerator being built next to their food plant. And then other companies started lining up against them as well. So I think when farmers get word of this and get organized and become part of the fight here, because they have a very serious interest in this, that'll help shift the tide.
We've talked about the air and the soil a bit, but my question is about water. I understand that water is used in a scrubbing procedure in part of the process. I would like to know how that is going to affect our water supply as far as quantity and, in the end, quality.
That's not my bailiwick, that's your,
Okay.
you are the technical guy.
I don't have much of an answer for you because I didn't read much about how they were going to deal with that in their proposal, which is also troubling. But it's a really important question, to put it mildly, of course.
Hello. I'm a different age generation than some people, but it's a question. I don't think it's goofy or anything. I play lots of Sim City, and in the game they have a waste to energy plant. And today I simulated the city of the waste energy plant. Usually I build the power plants first in this game. And the waste energy plant, the first thing it did was, do we have enough power? And we didn't have enough power in the city in this computer game. And the game says, before you built this waste energy plant, the Incinerator, whatever it's called, it says produce heavy pollution. So how many would it lower our house values too, the whole city? Because when I built this trash plant, I built my industry around it, not houses, because that's where the riffraff hangs out. I'm not saying a bad word, but.
Well, a very good question. And
I can show you pictures of my iPhone.
yeah, I'd be interested. Well, let's look at this. If there was 6,000 tons a day, or I heard they might be even lowering it now to 4,000, which is a little still ridiculous, but the reality check is setting in. Think of how many train loads if they brought it in by trains. How many of you would like to, even if this was no pollution coming out of their facility, how many of you would like to buy a home next to, in a town where 6,000 tons of garbage are coming in every day? See any hands? I don't think so. So I think there's certainly the potential for affecting property values, and it's kind of an unknown. It depends on what the facility would be. But I think even just looking at the importation, what would Logansport's reputation be? If Pyrolyzer was able to build what they claimed in their response to the request for proposals, people around the world would know that Logansport has the largest most likely the largest municipal waste facility involving combustion on the planet.
And there are
That's
studies
the
showing,
answer.
sorry, there are studies showing lower property values around incinerators and landfills as well. We can make them available.